as well. And if you had a nice poem, we're up to Ches Amud Aleph. Yeah, we are up to Ches Amud Aleph Rav Popper. It's about it's not quite halfway down. It's about a third, more than a third, though I reckon. Yeah, we're in the sugya of the notion of basically of communal responsibility. In other words, the responsibility that rests on a kehillah, on a community, on individuals within that community or within that city, and what particularly to do about those categories of people who are not necessarily able to make those decisions for themselves or may not benefit directly from the particular forms of payment that's being expected from people that the people are expected to contribute to. That's really where we are, what we're dealing with now. So we were talking about Talmidei Chachamim and their responsibility. We'll come back to that as well soon. But Rav Popper, can you see that about just a third of the way down? Rav Popper Roma Karya Chadata Yasmi. So now we're talking about what about the Yesomim? You have orphans in the town. They can't make a decision as such for themselves. What Rav Popper did was this town required the digging of a new well. Rashi says, Karya Chadotos, Yitzias Kriyas Be'er Mayim Chaim Lishtois, right? They had to dig a new well for drinking water. He placed the responsibility on the Yesomim to contribute to that, like everyone else. They had to contribute as well as everyone else. So Rav Shisha Brei Davidi Rav Popper. So Rav Shisha Brei Davidi said to Rav Popper, V'dom Aloi Midvil. He says, V'dom Aloi Midvil. What does it mean, V'dom Aloi Midvil? So Rashi says, Lemidvil, Yimtsu B'mayim. They might not find water. They might not find water if Sadim Chinam, yeah? They might not find water. They won't. If Sadim Chinam might be lost, they'll lose out for nothing, right? They'll lose out for nothing. The Yasmi Lavnim Echiloninu, the Lechalo and Yesomim. You see, the problem is the Yesomim are not able to be moichel. They're not able to forgive this. This is the problem here. They can't effectively, if it comes out that it was actually a worthless exercise. The problem is they can't be moichel because they don't have the capability of doing so. It seems that we're talking about children here, ketanim, they yesomim, and therefore they can't. So how can you take that expense on at their expense, if you like? Omalesi said to him like this, an interesting response. He said, Mishkol shekil minayu. He says, what I'll do is I take the money from them, midvil, right? If it works out that it's a successful exercise and we actually manage to strike water, then fine. If not, if not, then I return the money to them. Now this is an interesting thing. This is a very interesting thing. We're saying that you take the money from them, we use it, but it would be on condition, and it would return the money if it was a useless task, if it was a useless exercise. Does anyone understand? I mean, how are we to understand this? How are we to understand this? If it's an expense that the city feels is on them, we're taking the principle that since they're going to benefit from it, therefore they can be expected to contribute to it. They've obviously got money that's been left over to them, left over for them. Problem is that they can't. If it doesn't work out, you can't cause them a loss, right? So what's the logic here? I don't know whether anyone has any particular thoughts or suggestions. And maybe it makes sense. I mean, do you feel like it makes sense?
So the orphans, they're old enough that you can take taxes from them, but they're not old enough that they can't represent the problem afterwards.
So what do you mean you can't? Meaning, it doesn't sound like they are old enough to take taxes from, right?
But the Gemora is saying you take tax from them.
Yeah, but I'm saying it doesn't seem to be that they are of an age where they have a particular, you can ask, or what they say is, these decisions are being made on their behalf, right? That's the whole concern here. The concern is they're not old enough to say, okay, well, it's okay, I don't mind, it was a good try, and, and we thought there would be water there and there wasn't, what a normal adult would say, we understand these things happen, we're doing, whatever. They can't do all of that. So it can only be...
So the custodian, whoever, can't do that either then?
That's what it seems to be saying. That's what seems to be the case. Yeah, seems to be the case. Yeah.
Is the implication of that then that any investment that's a problem for any investment made on behalf of Yesomim then?
Yes, it
basically
is.
The money in a deposit account, and that's it.
Yeah, it is. Effectively, it is a problem. It is a problem. It is a problem. I mean, there's that I found what I was looking for now. I mean, it's only a few lines. You can look it up if you want. If you've got the big Gemora all the Mefarshim in the back, then Mukhi Yosef talks about this. If you want to see it, you can. It's in the how to find it? Yeah, it's like towards the. Well, the Mukhi Yosef is before the Mordcha. That helps, doesn't it? It's like it's towards the end. It's towards the back. It's on the Rif. The Mukhi Yosef is on the Rif, and the Rif is. This is not going to help either. The Rif is after the Marsha. Basically, towards the end, anyway. It's Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Daf Hey Amud Aleph of the Dafei Rif. Don't worry if you don't have a big Gemara because it's only a couple of lines anyway. I'll just read it aloud. But if you want, it's nice to see inside. It's nice to be. He explains this a bit more, and he says. I mean, it's right at the. Have you got that Daf Hey Amud Aleph? So it's towards the end. It's about 10 lines up from the end of the Amud. And he says, he starts off where it says there's a note on the side which says Shaykh L'El. If you've got an old print, you might have a newer print, then it doesn't have that. Where it says Pirush Rama, I'd say about just maybe 12, 15 lines up. Basically, okay, they were digging a well and they didn't know for sure they would find good water. The problem was they wouldn't find water that was there's a good word for that, potable. Yes, I think that's the right word, right? Nimtza, and you've lost, caused them to lose out, and they can't be mochel. Now this is the key point. Midville, so he says like this. So his response, Rav Papa's response was, if it works out, zechusu lohem lishov mehem, right? Then it's a zechus for them. Then they're benefiting. So we have a principle which is you can be mezakeh someone, you can do something which benefits someone. Shelo b'fonav. If you remember Yisomim, if they're underage minors, right? It's as if they're not there. They can't give an opinion. You can't ask them, do you mind, do you not mind, right? They've got no das. Halachically, yeah? So as if they're not there. So we have to follow the basic rules of what you do when you are working out, am I allowed to do something which is going to affect someone else? And the answer is you can do something which affects someone else if it's a zchus for them, if it's something they're going to gain from. So that's the point here, right? If they're going to use they're going to use the water from the well, there's going to be well water, right? That's good. We can say Zachin Adam Shlei B'fonov. And if not, Madrana Lahu, I'm going to have to pay them back. Then it's a debt for them, and you cannot cause a debt to someone not in front of them. You can't cause someone to lose out if they're not there. So it's Zochin Adam Shlei B'fonov. That's what the Mukhi Yosef says. Now it's interesting that the Rabbi Leib Steinman in his Parasha Yas HaShachar, he says that you see from this Mukhi Yosef that you can say this idea of Zochin La'odom Shalei B'fonov, right? Even if it involves taking money, right? Which is quite interesting. There is apparently, he brings here, that there is a Toras HaChoshen who says that the whole idea of a zchus and it for being for the benefit of someone does not only applies where you're like acquiring something on their behalf or something like that. He says zoicha be'ezeh dovar, but not to actually separate sort of financial resources from the balabayas, right? Like literally spend his money. Yeah, that can't be considered as zchus. You can't spend someone else's money and say, but it was for your benefit. Do you know what I mean? That's the question, right? You see from here, but the way the Mukhi Yosef is understanding this Gemara, that technically you could even spend someone else's money. I'm not saying we should advise people to go and do this, but there are circumstances where even spending someone else's money, you can argue it's a zechus, it's zochin la'odom. I can cause someone to have a benefit. Shalei b'fonov. He says,
as long as you can guarantee you're not going to lose their money.
Exactly. That's what you see from the Gemara.
Which is unrealistic, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's. Well, it's
so you can never really do it.
You couldn't. Let's put it in modern terms, right? You could never invest someone else's money without. Yeah. Well, the Yisomim or someone.
Is it daf for Yisomim or anybody?
No. We're talking about Yisomim, but the principles presumably would apply to anyone. except the difference is that if
Like Das.
yeah, that's the thing. It's about the das. So it's not this case is not going to be relevant to adults because all normal adults have das. They're expected to contribute to the needs of the city. They have to contribute to the needs of the city, and that's just a requirement, responsibility they have. The problem is that that with adults you can say, well, if it doesn't work out, right, then they are able, and maybe there's a mutual social contract that everyone understands. They'll forgive if it doesn't work because that's what you do. Sometimes the council will try and invest the money and it won't work. You know, that's part of how you live normal life. The problem is that Yesodom cannot do that. They cannot forgive anything because they're children. That's the problem, right? But the principles are the same. So in other words, if we're taking it down this route, it seems to be that what we're saying is the only way you can do this is in a way that will definitely not cause them to lose out, and therefore he had to put the money aside and would only be allowed to spend the money in the event, that it was actually definitely going to work. So he collected the money and he said like this: I'm going to keep the money and pay it towards the cost of the well in the event that the digging of this well is successful. So what I'm saying is like, you couldn't go and sort of take someone else's funds as I said, in like a modern day example, you can go and take someone else's money and invest it and say, but I try to help you, because by definition, there's an element of risk there and you cannot risk losing someone else's money. Yeah. I don't know how this works in a practical halachic sense, because generally the idea, it sounds very difficult to be able to spend someone else's money and then argue that was a zochin adam shelo b'fonov. But that effectively is what's going on here. Except that he said I only did it because there was zero risk because I put it to the side and I only used it in the event that it would work. It's an interesting concept.
But the Gemora is then saying you can do it if you're going to indemnify them for the loss.
Yes, that's what it seems to be saying. Yeah. That's right. That's what he says. And if not, I'll give it back to them. Yeah, exactly. So there will always be no loss. Yeah, but I'm saying the question is that has that got broader application or not? So what Rabbi Steinman is saying is that the Mukhi Yosef seems, from the Mukhi Yosef, the Ketos HaChoshen seems to take on that the whole idea of Zachin Adam Shelo B'fonov, which is what this is based on according to the Mukhi Yosef, doesn't work if you're physically spending someone else's money. Zachin Adam Shelo B'fonov, where I can say, we had a case before. Didn't we have a case when you were improving someone's garden or something like that? That's different. There you can say, I'm benefiting you. I'm harvesting your crops, and you're going to gain from it, and that sort of stuff, right? That's not the same as this.
Don't you have the same with chometz on Pesach and the halachas of if you know that someone has got chometz in their possession, or they don't know they've got chometz? Right. There's a similar sort of thing, though, that. But then
yes,
you have got a loss, but you're avoiding a loss.
Yes,
but that's the question: are you allowed to spend money? That's the thing.
Yes, but
are you allowed to spend money to sell their chometz?
Yeah, but you're directly avoiding
a loss,
helping them avoid a loss, because if you didn't sell their chometz, then their chometz would become also after Pesach.
Yeah, but wasn't it that you don't know that they don't mind if they lose their chometz? So there was some esoteric case. I can't remember it.
No, there's a straightforward case. There's a straightforward shaila in halacha where if you know that there's someone who has either forgotten or hasn't bothered to sell their chometz, can you sell it on their behalf? Can you go to the Rov and make a kin on their behalf? Zachin Adam Shelo B'fonov. That's a real shaila in halacha. But that might work. That might be okay either way. And I can't remember how it plays out in halacha. If my memory serves me correctly, I think technically it can be done. Because of this reason, again, I'm not sure whether we would or not, but whatever. Leave aside the practical side of it. From this, that wouldn't contradict anything we've said, because they on the contrary, you're saving them a loss. Yeah. Because the chometz will become also. Yeah. Okay, so Amar of Yehuda, the Gemara carries on. Hakol egli gapo afilu miyasmi. So this follows the same principle again. So le'egli gapo, Rashi says l'shari chomes ha'ir. So the gates, the walls of the city, lahatzaven delosis. Egli gapo means like to put in walls, to put in doors and gates in the city. Rashi says egli is delosis is doors. Kamei truku gali brachas, more brachas. That's the very famous Gemora about Gamliel, when he shut the doors of the Beis Medrash, and he says only those who are tocho kabaro, the inside is like the outside, are allowed to come in. The Gemara uses the phrase in Aramaic, truku gali, says shut the doors, I think, right? So gali means the door, means doors. Gapo is a stimo. Gapo means to seal, a shut. The Gemara that talks about, I think, finding something, I think it means behind a wall or something sealed or whatever, right? So he says everyone has to contribute to this. Afilu miyasme, even the orphans. But the Rabbanon, the same principle as we said before, the Rabbanon do not require protection. This is part of the protection, the gates of the city. The Rabbanon don't require protection because they have the Torah to protect them, and therefore, or whatever it is, therefore they do not require. They are not obligated to participate in this. This tax you can take from the Yesomim, yeah, because here there's zero risk, I think. Meaning the whole question before was exploratory digging of a well that might not work. So therefore you might be spending their money and they can't be mochel that money, right? Here, you're spending the money to build gates in the walls of a city. They need the protection, the Yesomim, as much as anyone else. They just unfortunately don't have any adult, or they have a responsible adult on their behalf, but they can't make the decision that they're underage. They can't make the decision themselves. Here it's clear they do participate. Hakola karya pasya afilo merabonon. But again, this follows the same principle. So karya pasya, Rashi says chafiras bar. That means digging a pit, the shtos mayim, well, sorry, to drink water. That refers to that word pasya, refers to the vessel, which is always there, the bucket which is there that the passers-by can drink from. So this is afilo merabonon. Because why shouldn't the Rabbanon need the well to drink from? It's not that we're saying we haven't got favoritism to rabbis here. The point is that the principle is that on the specific point, at least this far, the specific point of the protection side of things, the guarding of the city, right? That is not something they need to participate in. But other things, yes. So it seems. But that is only. So it's one more Rashi. Even from the Rabban, everyone requires water, but that the Gemara qualifies it. That is when they don't themselves go out to dig it themselves. They hire workers. If they go out with a achluz, is like there's an announcement. They call on people to come together. It's not appropriate to send out the rabbis to dig the wells themselves, and therefore they're not involved. Therefore, they do not have to participate in the physical digging of the well. Rashi says, they themselves don't go out with hachroza, with an announcement lachbar to dig. They hire workers to do it on their behalf, so they don't have to go and dig it themselves. They can So if they're hiring workers, then they need to participate in providing those funds. Yeah.
That case of Rob, I'm sorry to go back to it. That case of Rob Popper is a very strange one, because there's got to be a benefit to even exploring for water. If people need water, then okay, some are successful, some are not. You're not needlessly spending their money. Okay, it might not work, but there is a public benefit in digging a number of wells and seeing which ones produce water. So
I see what you mean. Yeah, I see. You mean there's no reason why they shouldn't.
The public good is to dig wells, and some might, and you just accept.
Yeah. Why should they not?
Why? I just find it difficult.
Why should the Yesomim pay? Why didn't you pay?
Because they benefit from it, Yossi. So they might benefit. But, they got to drink water. So they will benefit from it in the same way they benefit from security and police and everything else. They benefit from provision of water. The fact is, you just throw that into the general. Maybe taxes were raised in a different way in those days, and it was specific to individual projects.
Yeah. See, I think actually, if I'm understanding correctly, I think Rabban Leibaz asked your question, because he says, it says here, that we saw, he says, why do you have to have that reason that it's a zechus shelo b'fonov, and that's why you're allowed to take the money? They benefit through spending the money. Shetziu kesef. Havali zeh nehena v'zeh choser dechayev. This is benefiting, and I'm not sure why he uses that phrase. I'm not sure what he means with that. This is zen and v'zeh choser. He's losing anyway. But I think that's what he's getting at, right? The idea that at the end of the day, you know, why do you have to come on to Zochin Adam Shalom Befonov? The money is being spent to directly benefit them, right? Then he says, it could be the you need Zochin Adam to be able to take the money in advance. He says, even though they found the water, if they haven't yet benefited from drawing the water, you can't obligate them to do this. You need to come on to that because the idea of being able to sort of take money in advance. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch here, let me just show you the Shulchan Aruch because I've got it here on Bar Ilan. The Shulchan Aruch here it phrases it quite an interesting way. Can you see this? Yeah, can you see that? Right? Can you see what? Yeah. Can you see it? Yeah. Right. Look at it's the second half of this sif. It's in Choshen Mishpat Kuf Samach Gimel. This is it. The bit before about the whole thing talks about the Chaim. It's worth seeing the whole thing. What he called This is directly what we've been talking. This from this Gemora. Anything that's needed for protecting the city. Everyone has to participate. Take them in Chachomim. They don't need protection. Because their Torah protects them. You know, fixing the roads and the streets. Yeah, they're not going to get out of that. They're going to have to pay that as well. That's nothing to do with protection. But if people are going to fix it themselves, then the Talmidei Chacham don't go out with them. It's not appropriate. It's not fitting that they should go there digging, you know, fixing the streets themselves, you know, in the yellow vests. This is the case. If they were digging a river, to bring water to the city, the same idea. So then you claim even from Yisomim, because that's a zechus for them. So they've got investments, they've got fields, they've got vineyards, they want to use the water. Therefore, something happens, it goes wrong, the water doesn't come. Since they haven't benefited, you've got to give back to them, like you said. It's an indemnity clause, really, right? You've got to return to them what they have, whatever you've taken from them, and anything similar as well. Then he adds in brackets, which maybe we'll come to. That's quite interesting. There are more ads. You don't have to participate even in building a shul because they're not b'nei mitzvah. They're not of age, right? But what I'm pointing out to Shulchan Aruch is, if you look at the way he's phrasing it, yeah. You're taking the money, right? You're taking the money because the assumption is they're going to benefit directly. But you just have to bear in mind that something goes wrong, you have to give it back. It's not that you're not spending their money. You are. It's just that you'll have to return it. That's how the Shulchan Aruch is paskening from this Gemara. I'm sure there's more to it, but I think that maybe get sort of a bit clearer in that sense. Let me just stop there. Is that all right? I hope that's I think that's helpful.
I mean, yeah.
How can you have an indemnity if the Yisomim can't legally claim for it? They can't sue you for it.
No, you have to pay them, Yossi, out of your own. It's not an indemnity they can claim. But you
can you have an indemnity that you can't claim?
You have to be prepared to pay them back voluntarily.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like
well, they don't have the ownership. So the whole point is
that's right. There's a whole role of custodian and how that works, and apotropsim for Yisomim and everything else, and how they are, you know, what the level of responsibility that they have as well. The Gemora here doesn't talk about that at all, and we're using that phrase that it's almost like a responsibility on the town to indemnify them. You know, they need to take. You have to remember as well that this could be massively relevant. I mean, you know, you could have a situation. We've got a village, yeah, and the wealthiest guy in the village passes away, unfortunately, and he leaves children, and you know, Nebuch, right? Now, it could be that unless you use their money to dig the well, right, you don't have a well. We're thinking of it as like a massive city, so you think, oh, Nebuch, leave the Yisomim alone. But he might own half the land. This guy, yeah, you know, those kids might. So if you don't spend their money on the water, right, then you got a major problem. I mean, that's going to be a straightforward case if you think about it, you know, where you're going to need to do this. Yeah. Okay. Right, let's carry on. Rebbe Posach Tzoros b'shnei b'tzoros. Rebbe opened the granaries, the storehouses in a year of famine. Omri said, "Yikonsu bali mikra, bali mishnah, bali gemora, bali halacha, bali hagoda." He says everyone can come and benefit from the granaries in the years of famine. Those who have learned Torah, those who have learned Mishnah, Gemora, Halacha, even Agadata. Aval ami haaretz al yikonsu. Ami haaretz are not allowed to enter and benefit. He didn't want them to benefit from it. Dochak. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram v'nechnas. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram pushed his way in and he entered. Amalei said to him, Rabbi Parnaseni, support me, Rabbi. Amalei said to him, Beni, my son, Karisa, have you learned any Torah? Amalei lav. He says, no. Shonisa, have you learned Mishnah? Amalei lav, no, nothing. And came, but Me'afarnasecha, I says, how can I support you? With what? Through what can I support you? What zuchus can I support you? Amalei said to him, Parnaseni kekelev v'cha'orev. You should support me like a dog and a raven. Hashem has a pity on and supports them, so why can't you support me? Parnasei, he supported him, he gave him money. After he left, Yosef Rebbe became tzar. Rebbe was sitting and he was upset. Or he said, Oy li, woe to me, shnasati piti l'amaretz. He regretted what he had done because he's given some of his bread to an amaretz. Amalafana Rishim bar Rebbe, his son said to him, Shema Yonasan ben Amram talmid chohu. Maybe this wasn't such an amaretz. Maybe this was Yonasan ben Amram, your student. She'ena rotze lehonos mikovod Torah miyomov. He never wanted to have benefit from the honor of Torah, so he would pretend to be an Amoretz, right? That's why, but really he wasn't an Amoretz. Bodku v'ashkach, they checked and they found that was indeed the case. That was indeed the case. Amar Rebbe, and then Rebbe said, Yikonsu hakol. It sounds like Rebbe then sort of regretted his original decision. That's what it sounds like. Yikonsu hakol. Then he said, anyone can come in. Anyone can come in. Yeah. So that's what he said, yeah. Although it's not entirely clear. It's not entirely clear whether because now the Gemora goes back on to investigate what his original reasoning was. So whether he completely retracted from it or not, I'm not sure. But let's see what it says. The Gemora says, Rebbe l'tamei. Rebbe says, Rebbe went according to his reasoning. Dom Rebbe says, Ein parnas bola olam b'shvil ami haaretz. Punishment comes to the world only because of ami haaretz. Kahudemei klila. There was a story of the value of a crown. Maseres Hashas says, the king's crown was stolen, and they placed the responsibility on the Jews who didn't look after the city, and they said that they had to pay for the value of the crown, the Shodua Tiveria, and that value of the crown, the whole of Tiveria was expected to pay for the crown. Also, the Kami the Rebbe, they came from Rebbe. They came from Rebbe and they said, "Listen, fair's fair. The Rabbanon should pay their way as well. Tamini Chacham should contribute to the value of this cost that the king is placing on us." Amalu said to them, "Lo amrulei arukin. Lo amrulei lo. Yeah, Amalu said to them, "No, they're not going to contribute." Amrulei said to him, "Arukinon. So we're going to run away. We will run away, and we won't have to pay." Amalu said to them, "Aruku. So run away. Aruku palgeon. So half of them left. Alua palgo." So what they did was they reduced the cost. The king was mochel half, he forgave half of the cost, and he removed it from them. Also, Hanu Palgo coming to Rebbe, so that half came in front of Rebbe. When they said to him, the rabbi should give with us. So he said to them, Lo. Yeah, they said, no, the rabbis are still not going to contribute. Arukinons will run away. Aruku, he said, so run away. Aruku, they ran away. Aruku Kulu, they all ran away. Pashahu Kovis, they left a certain guy, one guy, unfortunately, Nebuch, this one guy was washed clothes, Shajua Kovis, and they placed it on the guy who washed the clothes. Shajua Kovis, or the whole cost. Orak Kov, maybe not the whole cost, maybe it was the other half that was left. Anyway, they put that cost on the on him to the cost of him to pay the whole thing. Orak Kovis, he ran away. Poka Klilo, and then literally means the crown split, which means that the Rabbeinu Gershom says that means that the whole decree of the crown was finished. They stopped trying to get it from them. Anyway, the whole point of the story is, Omer Rebbe says, Re'isim, you see, that the whole punishment only comes to the world because of the Ami Haaretz. Because as soon as they all left, there was no one else. There was no more requirement for them to contribute to the cost of this this punishment, this gezerah, which would have cost them a lot of money. It was over. It was finished. It was finished. Yeah. So we'll come back to these Amoritz in a second. Let's just see Rashi on this. But so originally we said the Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram said, "Support me, kekelev u'ka'orev," like the dog and the raven. What's the significance of the dog and the raven? Rashi says, "Shechos HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim." Hashem has pity on them. Shneimah, the Apostle says, "Yodea tzadik din dalim." The righteous knows the judgment of the impoverished. Levisha kelev, the dog, mezonus of muatzin. It's very difficult for a dog to find food, apparently. I don't own a dog, so I don't know whether how this works, but it says that the food stays inside the dog for 3 days. V'gabi orev, because he's got to make the most of the food. V'gabi orev with the raven kesiv, it says libnei orev asher krol, that the young of the raven that cries out. V'isha orev achzori al bonov, because the raven is very cruel to its young. They even get insects or things from their own excrement, and they consume that. So they're very difficult for them to find food. This point about the raven, well, it wasn't comment. Let's just see the end of the other Rashi. So to make clear, there was a crown for the Caesar. Also, the Rebbe, they came in front of Rebbe. He forgave half of the crown and he removed it. They placed it on the kovis. Al hakovis. They placed the cost on that washer guy, whatever the kovis, the one who washed clothes. He had to pay the whole thing. So he had to pay the whole. He had to end up paying the whole thing. So it's interesting. I have this here as well in a second. So the question is, what is the significance of the raven? And this is related specifically to the Am Ha'aretz as well. The Maharal says this idea of Ein Poronos Ba Ela What does that mean? Why should that be? Why should it be that Rebbe's understanding that the punishment only comes because of Amei Haaretz? He says, because things which are entirely, these ideas of Chomer and Surah, we spoke about on Shabbos actually. Chomer really is the base sort of material, and the Surah is the form, which is the meaning, the depth, the understanding, the reason, everything else behind it, right? That's what Surah is. I mentioned on Shabbos the Haftarah of Parshas Tetzaveh, which we only read in a leap year or a strange year like this. The second pasuk of the Haftarah. The Haftarah is about the Bayis Shlishi. The word Surah is mentioned 4 times. So Soloveitchik says that the word that surah means meaning and intent. It's talking about the Beis Hamikdash, the future Beis Hamikdash. There's the basic idea of construction, how you build it, and then there's the meaning and intent and purpose and significance, and that's what surah is. Now the idea, he says, the Maharal here is that if a person is entirely chomer, they're only physical physicality without any spiritual essence or any tzura, entirely chomer, that receives some that attracts almost the chisaron, something which is missing. That's why poronos, bad things coming, which is by definition is something causing a lack, a problem in the world. It's because of Amei Haaretz. They're entirely earthly and materialistic, and therefore therefore the lack, which is the punishment itself, will comes as a result. Now the point is that the raven, what did the raven do? The raven did not follow Noach's instruction. So the raven didn't go where Noach sent the raven, where he was supposed to send and to basically sort of talk and inform on the repopulating of the world, and the raven didn't do that. The raven was haloich v'sho, right? Didn't do what it was supposed to do. So therefore, that's the idea. That is the idea that it never, there was something. He says the there's something about the raven that represents something which is not to do with the world being settled the way the world should be built up. Yeah. Yeah, and he also doesn't like dogs either. I don't want to offend dog owners. I don't know. He says also it's also not considered to be the dog. Also, he says is I don't know why one is specifically about a dog. Yeah, but the Rashi doesn't seem to say that it's a negative thing about a dog. It's simply that the dog is sustained within its. It just has difficulty finding food. Interestingly enough, there's evidence. I heard something this week. There is evidence that certainly historically most Jews owned dogs. Do you know that? Did own dogs rather than did not own dogs. And you see that from Shulchan Aruch. Where do you see it in the Shulchan Aruch? If you look at Simon Shin Ches of Zion, I know this is it's just an interesting point. Simon Shin Ches Sifchov Zion, it talks about, it talks about basically, it talks about things that are left, the Atzomas and Klippin that are left on the table, after a meal in halachos or muktzah, and it talks about them being ru'iyim l'machal behemo, or they're fitting for dogs, and being able to move them off the table. And because of that, because they're ru'iyim l'machal behemo, therefore, even if they become detached from the flesh on Shabbos, it's still allowed. Okay, and there's obviously details of these halachas, but the point is that it would seem to be that it was the norm. People had animals, they had dogs, right? It was the norm. So there you are. That's something which makes dog owners feel better. Nowadays, it seems trying to keep everyone happy. There you are. Anyway, so that's it. That's about the raven. That's about the raven and the raven and the dogs. But anyway, that was his defense. He was saying, "Am I less than them?" Rebbe in the end, did say Yikonsu Hakol. It's not entirely clear, as I said, why it is that Rebbe changed his mind. Was it because he saw that you could miss people if you had this blanket rule of the Amei Haaretz not being able to come? He couldn't, people who were worthwhile being supported, or was it because he actually regretted the policy entirely? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this. It's not entirely clear. I'm not sure if there's anything.
It doesn't seem very Kol Yisrael Ravim Zelazeh.
Yes, that's the difficulty, isn't it? That is the difficulty. So the Maharsha, I think the Maharsha is really trying to address this. The Maharsha has a problem. Maharsha says, "Afilu ani goyim afarnasin im ani Yisrael." Right? Even those who are not, even the Gentiles are supported with ani Yisrael. We know this from other Gemoras used to support both, right? And he says, B'shnei Ra'ovon. Here it was a particular year of famine. That was the case, right? Just reading the Maharsha. The whole world was in difficulty in tsar. And we say in the Gemora first break in Tanis, the person, okay? The person, the specific circumstances here were where there was trouble and pain for the entire world. And then there's a responsibility for everyone to feel part of that pain and to, like you say in Yiddish, zustel towards that and feel part of the tzibur, not to separate themselves from the tzibur. He brings the example of there's a osel adam l'shamish mitosav shnei ra'avon. Why? Why should tashmish be not allowed in the years of famine? Because the idea that a person can't just carry on with their normal life when there's a time of great suffering. He says, since the Amei Haaretz, if you do want to follow it, let's say it's in the Maharsha, the Maharsha is before the Rif. Anyway, after the Rosh. But anyway, so he says like this. He says, they continue as normal. They're eating as normal, doing everything as normal. Right? He wanted to do this in order to make them also feel and recognize there was a need to be involved in the pain of the tzibur. And he says, and then what was his response? He said, sustain me like the Orev and the Kelev, like the raven and the dog. So apparently there seems to be, it's a Gemora, he brings a Gemora in Perek Chek in Sanhedrin, that they didn't take part in this prohibition of being Mishamish Mitzoson in the Teva, the dog and the raven, right? Did Noach say he's not going to feed them? No. Noach did feed them in the Teva, and they got their food like everyone else. So he says also, Chom as well also didn't listen to that rule, and he also he doesn't bring a raya from Chom because maybe he might have fed himself. Yeah. Yeah, he also brings a Ritva who says that again, it also says from another perspective, it was specific to that particular circumstances because it was a year of famine, and if you would give it to the Amoritz, then someone else, the Tan Chochem, would lose out. So the Maharsha understands that this is specific to this year of famine, and the idea that it was designed in order, Rebbe's Gezerah was designed to ensure or encourage that they will participate in the tsar of the tzibur, of everyone else, and not separate themselves and feel they could still get whatever they needed without participating in it. But I think your question still stands. It's still, but I don't know whether that helps a little bit.
Maybe it was simply making the point that dogs and ravens are both treif animals. You'd certainly feed your kosher animals because you need them, and you're even feeding treif animals that you don't really need at all. They have no use to you. Therefore, you should certainly feed people.
Exactly. That's right. And this is the point here. This is one of those Gemaras where you see both from the story. If you take a step back and you look at the whole story as a whole, you see both sides of the dilemma being brought out in the Gemara, right? Rebbe has the perspective, well, why should I? They should be doing this. And then he responds, but I'm not worse than a Kelev and an Orev. So, from the Gemara itself, what I'm saying is you see both sides. You see both sides of the argument and the dilemma that you have that there is in such situations. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not following the Maharsha. The message I'm getting from you, what the Maharsha is saying is that he opened up his storehouses to the Talmidei Chachamim to make them feel as like they're part of the Tsar.
He only opened to the Talmidei Chachamim. He refused to allow the Amei Haaretz because they weren't participating in the Tsar and following what the Halacha says about being mishtatef in the Tsar of the Tzibur, right? So in other words, they were continuing their lives as normal. That seemingly greatly upset Rebbe. And he says, I'm not going to feed them so that they understand that they cannot just carry on their lives as normal. Everyone else is doing things which Halacha requires, understanding Shnei Oven. He brings the example of Mishamish Mitosa, whatever it is. They're understanding they need to be part of the Tzibur and the Tsar. That's a massively important thing. You can't just carry on your lives that, Shalom Alay Nafshi, I'm happy, I'm okay. So therefore he was trying through this rule, was trying to encourage them to take part in the Tsar of the Tzibur, to participate. Maybe that's actually, I'm thinking now, maybe that helps explain why he actually then did open it for everyone. Maybe they got the message. Maybe that's why Rebbe said you can't su akol, everyone can enter. Maybe that's why maybe that was just a specific message in circumstance. The response of Yonasan ben Amram was equally interesting because he said there's basic, like you said, right? There's basic human need to support people, and we're not worse than the dog and the raven, right? This is again, it's another classic example of a piece of Agadata, which unfortunately, especially if we were learning in Daf Yomi, it seems very innocuous. There's a story, no, he did this, he didn't do this, we don't like Amiratzim, let's carry on. It's not what it means at all. It's much deeper, it's much more profound. It's the question of what attitude do you take in terms of, if you witness people who are not participating deliberately, it seems, in the tsar of the moment, going off on their own tangent and just like not participating in that tsar, do you just carry on and saying, well, it doesn't matter, even though they're doing the wrong thing, I'm still going to support them? Or do you say, no, there's a message, they have to understand that message first? That was Rebbe's perspective. So it becomes a much, that's how it is with that guy. If you stop, well, I've noticed this so many times, I got to learn. Even now, I'm understanding it more than I did when I was preparing the show earlier. You when you come to a piece of Agadata, in a way, it's harder than Halacha because the natural tendency is, oh, it's easy, let's run through. When actually, to get even the basic shut, you have to stop and think. Otherwise, you don't understand it at all. I think that's a fair, a fair comment on it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's carry on. How long is it to be in a city and you're measured like the people in the city? So this is a quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, when we talk about responsibilities like participating in building the walls and the doors and the gates and everything else, we said you've got to be there 12 months. Now, the Gemora has a problem with this. A Ramini, a question from Brisa, this is the Gemara in Sanhedrin that talks about the Ir Nidachas, the city which is going to be destroyed because of idolatry, the whole city. So the Chamer, remember there's a view that it never actually happened. Chameres, the donkey driver, Gameles, the camel driver, Veres Mokum, they're part going from place to place. And they lodge inside the city. The Hudcha Imohen, and they have their misfortune is that just when they happen to be staying in the city is condemned to destruction because of as an Ir Nidachas. So then Hein Beskila and Mamoinon Polat. So they don't follow the same rule as the Ir Nidachas. The Ir Nidachas is that they all have to be killed b'cherev, with the sword, and their property is destroyed. They bring it in Tochro Choiva to the middle of the city. You know, it's a psukim in what was it, Shoftim, I think, Pasha Shoftim, right? And you put burn the whole thing up in fire, right? That's what happens to the Ir Nidachas. These people are not included. They are killed b'skila, u'mamoinon polat, and their money escapes. But if they stay there for 30 days, hein b'sayef u'mamoinon ovad, they are killed by the sword, and their money is destroyed. Now, then they're part of the Ir Nidachas. The most basic question: why is it that here and there it's 30 days to be considered as resident in the city, and here it's 12 months? The Gemara says, no problem. There's the difference. One is to be considered resident in the city, like B'nai Masa. You're not resident. No, that's the next one. B'nai Masa means you're the citizens of the city, right? Like literally children of the town, right? You're actually citizens in the city. That takes 12 months. But to live in the city, to be considered resident in the city, residency rights, that's 30 days. Right? So there, the Gemara, what does it say in the Torah? It says, Yoshvei Ha'ir. What you've got to do with those who dwell in the city. Now, to be a Yoshev Ha'ir, to dwell in the city, 30 days. That's enough, right? But here, you need someone, here we're talking about, a sort of, who's considered an actual citizen, not just someone who's a resident in the city. That's 12 months. Kedesanya, as we see in the Brisa, with regards to Nadorim, Hamuda Nomi Anshe person makes a neder not to have benefit from people in the city, people in the city. If they've got there for 12 months, anyone who's lived there for 12 months, you can't benefit from them. Pachos mikan, less than that mutter, it's allowed. But if he says miyoshvei ho'er, from those who dwell in the city, anyone who's lived there 30 days, you can't benefit from them. From him, less than that, you're allowed to benefit from him. You're allowed to benefit from him. Okay. Now the Gemara asks, do we require 12 months in every respect? The Brisa says, it's not simple. It's not so simple. In order to contribute to the charity plate, which all these things had very specific rules. I think we'll come to them some more to them maybe in ensuing sugyas. That had to be. They used to have to. That was the plate which they used to give food to poor people. If you're there 30 days, they collect from you. 3 months lokupa. 3 months. You have to contribute to the kupa of tzedakah. The kupa of tzedakah. You've been to Krakow, right? You know the Kupa Shul in Krakow? If you've been to Krakow, in Krakow, one of the famous shuls there is the Kupa Shul. Why is it called the Kupa Shul? Because it was the shul which the wealthier members of the Kehillah built for those who benefited from the Kupa Shel Tzedakah, from the charity box, from the Tzedakah box, right? The Kupa Shel Tzedakah, that's what it is. Very interesting dilemma. Sometimes when we take students, they pose that question to them, right? On the one hand, it's amazing. Look at that chesed. They built a whole shul for the Aniyim. But on the other hand, they called it the Kupa Shul, and only the poor people went there. They had a different shul. because the wealthier guys wouldn't daven with them. So, is that chesed? Is it not? This is the dilemma, right? Anyway, that's what it's known as the kupashul. So, shishol iksus, 6 months in the city, you're there for ksus. If you're there 6 months in the city, you've got to contribute to paying for the garments, to contribute to their garments, right? And or to whatever garments are needed in the poor people in the city need clothes. And tishol ikvora, 9 months in the city for burial, to bury the poor people in the city, which is it seems to be that's an even greater expense. You see, the sliding scale here in terms of responsibility seems to be because each level costs more. Does that make sense? There's a higher amount you have to pay for each. So the responsibility of burying, sadly, those who are not able to pay for the costs of their levayas and everything else in the kvura was probably quite a sizable amount of money. And therefore, only if you've been there for 9 months did you have to participate. Shnei mosor, and 12 months lepase ho'er. And those are the beams of wood which strengthen the gates of the city, which presumably again is even more money. Anyway, the problem we have is clear that our Mishnah says 12 months you're treated like this is in the city. Here we see all different measurements. Oma, Rabbi Asim, Rabbi Yochanan, Kitznan, Nami Mas Nisan, Shnei Masor Chodesh. When our Mishnah says 12 months, Lepasi Oyer Tznan, it doesn't mean 12 months in every respect. It means 12 months for those beams of wood that strengthen the gates of the city. That is, in that respect, it is 12 months. But in other respects, it's not necessarily 12 months. Let's see Rashi on this. So Chameres v'Gameles, it's about 3/4 of the way down. Chameres v'Gameles sheyora shel chamorim shel gamolim, a caravan of donkey drivers or camels or whatever. Harei lebeskilo kedin shayichidim. Right? If they haven't been there long enough, they get stoned for idolatry, for avodah zarah, like other individuals. Yisuvi masa b'shloshim yom, 30 days. V'gabi Yer Nidachas k'sev yoshvei ha'er. With the Yer Nidachas, it says yoshvei ha'er, which is 30 days. They dwell in the city. And the Gemara then asks, "L'chol midim mekami ochel yoav midim b'nei ha'er." The full 12 months, do you not participate with the people in the city? No, we see shloshim yom l'tamchui. Kivin shashal shom shloshim yom, been there 30 days. Govin imenu gaboy tamchui ma'achol aniyim. The people are responsible for the tamchui, this charity plate, they collect from him the food for the aniyim. The kupa is litzdaka, that's regular tzedakah. Liksus is ani ha'er, the poor people in the city, to clothe them. Likvura ani ha'er, she yitzia seira. So Rashi said that's a great expense. That's a particularly great expense to pay for their levayas. So that's how it works. And that's why. So our Mishnah we're saying is specifically talking about the pasei ha'er. Now this halacha has an interesting relevance to a halacha actually I mentioned this morning in Mishnah Berurah Shir, which is directly relevant to Hilchos Pesach. Why is it relevant to Hilchos Pesach? So if you open I don't know if you can look it up after you want. If you have Mishnah Berurah handy, then you can open it up. But right at the very beginning of Hilchos Pesach, you have this halacha of Mo'es Chitin. Yeah, you got to contribute before Pesach to make sure that those who don't have money for matzahs, Mo'es Chitin, it's very important halacha, and it's really a chiyuv in that sense to make sure that it goes so far as it goes so far as
in Arvei Pesachim. It was yesterday's mission in the daf.
Well, exactly. Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's right. That's where it comes from as well. But there's this minhag liknos. The Ramah brings it. Minhag liknos chitin l'chalkan lanim l'tzorech Pesach. Yeah, and in fact, it even says the Mishnah Berurah says that it comes from the Gemora, as you said. I don't know whether it's only from that source in the Gemora. It's actually I think the Sharat same reason as Yerushalmi. But anyway, it's the same idea clearly as the beginning of Arvei Pesachim. It says the people in the city could even force one another to participate in this. Now then the Ramah finishes off. Anyone who's dwelt in the city 12 months has to participate in the collection of money for Mo'es Chitin for Seder night, for matzahs. And on that, the Mishnah Berurah says that this is really directly based on our Gemara. I mean, in the sense that this is the same discussion The Mishnah says if we see that he's entered the city to stay there, then he's chayav immediately. He brings the din of the Yud Beis Chodesh is also dependent. The oni is the same. If the oni has been there for 12 months, he gets a right to receive it. But if he intends to live there forever, then you have to give him immediately. Then the Achronim bring in the name of the Smak, and this is the point I wanted to bring out. The Chosar Achronim Shem Smak do idno nogim cholat stokas. The minhag nowadays is all stockers, whether the recipients or those who give it, b'shloshim yom is 30 days. It's 30 days for everyone. Okay, so nowadays that responsibility is alive. Once you've been in the city for 30 days, you are responsible to take part in this and to participate in these collections. And that is in fact brought in the Ramah in Yerideh and Hilchos Stocker, where the Ramah says the Shulchan Aruch brings these different things that we've mentioned. That someone who's been there 30 days, Kofin Osolitin Stocker La Kupa, 3 months, he's got to give the Tamchi, 6 months, he's got to give the Lixus, right? 9 months, he's got to give to Kvura, all these things, right? And he adds this point that if he intends to stay there, then he's got to give immediately, okay? And then the Ramah says, that nowadays we measure these things are measured 30 days in every respect. And as I say, as a matter of practical halacha, that plays out in Hilchos Pesach, right? If you've been in a city for 30 days, you have to participate in the collection before Pesach for Mois Chitin for the Aniyim of that city. So there you are. Inyoni Diyoma. All right.
Well, thank you.
Very good. See you next week. Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good week.